Hello, friends, and welcome to another edition of Transformational Astrology. I'm Henry Seltzer, and we want to talk about this new moon that's coming up on Monday, the 26th. And it's kind of a doozy of a new moon, as you will see. We have to make the best of these times. There's been a lot of outer planet interactions in all the lunations, and in this new moon also, that's the case. And what I like to say about that is that we really have to just remember that the universe is really on our side. It's actually operating to our benefit. And so there's another side to what's going on in the zeitgeist right now, difficult though it may be. That other side is that we're seeing sort of a caricature of some of the worst excesses of the capitalist system we have in this country. And I don't know what the solution is. For many years, it's been hard to figure out what the solution is. Just everybody having a better attitude and remembering that there's so much beyond just the material, so much beyond just what's rational and the 3D physical universe. There's also a mystical side to everything. And that's what I keep coming back to. I know that things are not what they seem, that there's more going on below the surface. And, we just have to keep faith and keep putting one foot ahead of the other. That's about all we can do, really. I did see a bumper sticker that I thought was very relevant, which is, "What doesn't kill me makes me tired." So a little bit like that, but let's take a look at the chart and see what we can see there. So you should be able to see the chart now. And as usual, we are doing the Aries sign on the cusp. We're doing the natural chart where the signs are identified with the houses. The first house is Aries, the second house is Taurus, the third house is Gemini, and so on. And we're doing that because we want to be very general. We don't know what time zone you're in. For you, the new moon may have a completely different rising than it does here on the West Coast, where we do have, this is the rising sign, the rising sign in degree, which is in Sag. So we have 2 degrees Sag rising, exactly opposite to 2 degrees Gemini Mercury, but that is only on the West Coast. Now, taking a look at this chart, it's rather remarkable, is it not? So many of the planets are located in one of 2 places, either the first or the third house, the Gemini house. And we're including in this Gemini configuration also Uranus, which is really 3 degrees away, and still in Taurus, but because 3 degrees within the cusp, we have an option called the house margin in TimePassages that allows you to see the planet within 3 degrees of the cusp as though it was in that house. That's why it looks like this. But we just have to remember that, as far as the mechanism of the third house, when we look at it this way in terms of an Aries on the ascendant, that is still to remember that Uranus does affect the third house because it's right there on the cusp of the third, and it is basically in that Gemini collection. So that there could be startling information, intuitional information. We have to pay a lot of attention to what comes up from inside ourselves, recognizing that logic and rationality is not the only source of information. And, we also see, of course, it's a Gemini new moon at 6 degrees of the sign. We also see that the ruler of Gemini, Mercury, is only 4 degrees away from that. So it is part of this whole configuration. And then also we have Jupiter at 26. And then when we talk about the Aries part of things, we have now, of course, Saturn in Aries. Saturn and Neptune conjunct in Aries at 0 and 1 degrees of Aries. Venus right in the middle of Aries, in fact at 20 degrees, and so therefore trine to Mars, which is at 18 degrees of a fire sign, Leo. And so that trine between Venus and Mars is interesting, bringing relationship into the picture as a factor. We want to go and get things done. Mars is also connected to the Sun, by the way. It's a quintile. So that's what you see here. So there is a lot of go, but doing it gracefully, there's an ownership factor, Mars being the ruler of Aries where Venus resides. So there's a connection between Venus and Mars here with the trine as well. And it's important to remember that we try to go gracefully as we go. We try to honor also the values of Venus, to be diplomatic, to be fair. We have values that we have to adhere to. So that's one of the things that's in balance right now is how we do our lives. And what's important also in this is the Saturn-Neptune. Saturn and Neptune together, they're very antithetical. It has a lot to do with polarity, polarization, which we have seen a lot of. Rick Tarnas talks about this. He talks about Saturn opposite Neptune during the 2004 presidential campaign and subsequent second term of George W. Bush, and mentions that is when this dichotomy of red states and blue states really became prominent. And we're seeing it now in spades, right? And he also says that you can't see from one group what the other group is doing. It doesn't make any sense. What are they doing? The right wing says, what are these woke folks doing? They're messing things up. And the left says, what are these right-wingers doing? They're messing things up. So, and they don't know. So anyway, it's very interesting times that we have. And this concentration of planets is interesting too. We call it out in the TimePassages software as a funnel, leading Saturn, focus Pluto, and that of course leaves out some of these new planets. These are new 21st century planets. Haumea, this one, Makemake, this one. We're not going to count those in the planetary patterns. We wouldn't count Chiron either, really, but Chiron is within this. You could say half of the circle is where it's occupied, and then what stands outside of that is Pluto. It does bring Pluto into greater prominence. And the other thing about Pluto being prominent is, of course, having Saturn and Neptune both right at the beginning of Aries, so making a sextile to this Pluto position, having the Sun and Moon at 6 and Mercury at 2, the midpoint being 4, it'd be 4 in maybe 10 minutes. That's pretty close to 342. So we have a very, and that's a trine. So the new moon is making a trine to Pluto, and Pluto is prominent in that way. And Pluto is also square to Haumea. And I find that whenever the Pluto-Haumea square is triggered, and we do have a trigger from the fact that Mercury is also in a quincunx 150-degree aspect to this position of Haumea. And Pluto with Haumea is the truth coming to light. And you can also associate that with Saturn and Neptune, because Neptune can be deception. And Saturn-Neptune can be deception unmasked, the practicalities coming into some kind of relationship with the beyond. Saturn represents the 3D world, what we have right here we can touch, feel, and taste. And then Neptune is what is beyond the 3D world. So, woo-woo kind of psychic kind of stuff, but it's there. We realize that there is this whole other part to life, which is mystical in nature. So you see that as bringing the mystical into more concrete realization. You see that as bringing the practicalities and making them a little fuzzy so we're not so sure about what they are. So it's very subject also to opinion, to possibilities of deception, possibilities of illusion, which is where we get this whole concept of what's so important right now, lies versus truth. And it's a focus in many different ways, comes up in many different avenues in this time. And we have to discern, we have to find our way to discern what is the true thing. And we get some help because the truth becomes exposed. The lies, that is to say, become exposed by the actual truth of the matter pretty much whenever we have court cases, because there's a big emphasis on facts in the court cases. It's not just propaganda at that point. So, you get the drift of what I'm saying, I think. This is a very important factor in our times. And I think with this new moon, we may very well see more things coming to light, like what was actually done and what was actually said and what was pretended to be done and said. And, because of Haumea and square with Pluto, and because of that being prominent with these positions of the inner planets, and with Saturn also, Saturn-Neptune. So I think that's a big factor in today's astrology. Well, now the other thing to mention is we have, of course, this very close Chiron Iris. and that is to the minute of a degree. So they're both at 25 degrees of Aries, 28 minutes. Happens to be that they line up to that exact extent just when the sun and moon line up to the degree and minute for the new moon. There isn't much of an aspect there, but what we do have is Jupiter at 26, almost 27, and then we have 27 Taurus, which is Uranus, and that comes right into 25, you see. So, and of course, Uranus also relates, it would be, it'd just be a perfect, almost perfect sextile, because it's almost at the beginning of Gemini. So the sextile that Uranus makes to Saturn and Neptune is going to become much more pronounced when Uranus actually gets to Gemini, which is not until July. But that's a time when things are going to really be, again, pretty strong, because we'd have all these outer planets lined up, you see, including Pluto. Well, what do we say about Chiron and Iris being prominent by this highlights them, the position of Jupiter, the position of Uranus highlights them. And what can we say about Chiron and Iris? Well, it brings out Chiron. Chiron is very much emphasized by that in the skies right now. And Chiron refers to inner wounding. So it may be that something happened in childhood for every one of us, I think. And then we bury it away. We don't want to go there. It might be shameful. It was painful. We don't want to go there. We don't want to dwell on it. So we wall it away inside ourselves. And once we do that, it takes an act of benevolence on our part and acceptance on our part to break through that earlier pattern of isolation. So there are basically hurt places within us that we don't always go there, but when we can visit them, when we can see them, when something comes up and it can make us think, what is that inside me? I have a friend that says, working with teenagers, but he says we're never angry for the reason that we think we are. And I think that really applies. And so when that anger comes up, when it might be also shame, or it might be lack of self-worth, when those things come up, you think back, what is that wound? Where did that come from? The little child is kind of perfect being in a certain way. And then the rough things happen, and sometimes people surmount it very well, and sometimes people don't, but they can learn to deal with it. So it's so important at this time, because of the prominence of Chiron in this configuration, that we make an effort to understand a little bit better about ourselves, about other people. When other people do things that we don't like, we might stop and think, well, where are they coming from in that, And it just broadens the scope of how we deal with each other. And we can really gain from the work that we do on our inner issues, when we can get to those, when we can really understand those, spend some time meditating, thinking about them. That can be a big turning point with Iris. In other words, Iris, spiritual warrior, in terms of soul intention, in support of soul intention, support of life purpose. It's what you must do when you find out about it, when you really tune into your inner values, what really counts for you deep inside. You find out what it is you cannot not do, and then you stand for that. That's yours. So the fact that it's in the sky combined, and also combining with Uranus and Jupiter as well, means that we do have a kind of a turning point that we can arrive at when we do investigate our inner wounding a little bit more thoroughly. It can be a turning point in terms of a greater understanding of our evolutionary purpose, what stage we're in. We're trying for authenticity, and we're trying for integration of all our parts. And Jung talked about that. He called it the principle of integration of everything within us. Individuation was his term for that. So just a couple things about this. And it is a conscious time with the Gemini associated with mind being the theme. It does bring in Pluto very distinctly, and Pluto's been very available. There was a square between Mercury and Pluto, and now there's a trine. The square was in the last full moon. So this is interesting times. You signed up for this, and you didn't miss out. There's very interesting times that we're in right now, and we just have to vote as we can, make articulate our truth as we can, see where you stand and stick to that. And that is all you can do at the moment, but it's enough. So I'll transition back. And so I'll just leave you with that. Good luck with it. And we all have to deal with it and just keep on keeping on. Don't let it get you too tired. Okay, take care. See you soon.